from tragic incidents in zoos that divided life into before and after, and unexpected turns at the bottom of the ocean, to frightening coincidences and terrifying stories the world will not soon forget. Today, we will immerse ourselves in the world of photographs that became the last in the lives of their authors. We spent a very long time gathering this material, so we hope you will appreciate it with a like and support it with any comment. I promise it will be very interesting, so watch until the very end. You are on the TopFacts channel, and we wish you a pleasant viewing. In the Cincinnati Zoo one spring, a small child only 3 years old accidentally fell into the enclosure with a gorilla named Harambe. Despite the fact that Harambe showed no aggression and was merely curious about the toddler, the zoo staff made the difficult decision to shoot the animal in a critical moment, believing the child's life was in danger. This story caused a huge public outcry. Some believed that the gorilla could have been tranquilized, while others still insist that risking the child's life was unacceptable. In one photo, a young man named Mud Han, a little over 20 years old, was in an enclosure with a white tiger at one of Delhi's zoos when tragedy struck. The shot was taken just a few moments before the predator's fatal attack, which cost the young man his life. Debate continues to this day over whether safety measures were violated or whether it all happened because of a chain of random factors. Olga Sheena took a photo of her husband, who was holding their sleeping child in his arms next to the boarding steps of a Metrojet airline airplane. The couple was returning home from a vacation in Egypt, and the caption under the photo read, "We are flying home soon." However, only a few minutes after takeoff, the plane crashed, breaking apart in midair and claiming the lives of everyone on board. In the capital of Georgia, a young Russian woman named Irina Glazunova, who had just turned a little over 20 years old, was vacationing with a friend and decided to film a video while walking sideways without looking at the road. Deeply absorbed in filming, she did not notice an open staircase at the entrance to the metro and fell from a great height, suffering a fatal traumatic brain injury. On a busy road in California, a man named Casey decided to help ducks cross the highway by stopping traffic. This was a noble act by a father of 2 children. Suddenly, he was hit by a car whose driver had no time to react. At the site of the tragedy, residents created a spontaneous memorial, laid flowers, and left small rubber ducks in memory of a kind-hearted individual. Polish influencers, a married couple and parents, moved with their children to a tourist area where they decided to take a spectacular photograph by climbing over a barrier at a great height. Their children stayed behind to take the picture. However, the couple could not keep their balance and fell, sustaining injuries incompatible with life. It became a terrible lesson about the danger of taking risks for an impressive shot. A photograph in which a group of hunters poses next to a freshly killed black bear might seem like a typical scene of hunting. But if you look closely, there is another bear in the background, likely a relative of the killed animal, quietly observing. No one expected such an onlooker, and the situation was extremely tense. A Russian teenager, Xenia Ignatieva, was passionately seeking extreme thrills in pursuit of spectacular photos. In one image, the 17-year-old girl is standing on an edge, trying to capture another dizzying shot. But she fell and landed on live electrical wiring, receiving a fatal shock of over 1,500 volts. A married couple, Tina and Gabe Watson, traveled to Australia to go diving on the Great Barrier Reef. Gabe assured everyone he was very experienced and convinced Tina to go underwater. In the photo, Tina is seen lying calmly at the bottom while Gabe swims nearby. But soon, it emerged that he left his wife alone and she could not be saved. The story became one of the most shocking cases in the world of diving. Steven Weber decided to make a marriage proposal through the glass of an underwater hotel room in Tanzania. Holding a ring and a note, he showed them to his beloved through the porthole. Unfortunately, miscalculating his air supply, he could not surface. What started as a romantic gesture ended in tragedy and became a sorrowful legend of love and bravery. In the photo, a small boy is sitting on his father's shoulders next to a car in the town of Omagh in Northern Ireland. Only a few minutes later, a powerful explosion shook the area, claiming the lives of nearly 36 people and injuring several hundred. The picture became a chilling reminder of how an ordinary street can turn into the center of a tragedy in an instant. An older man named Ki Suk Han, who was over 50 years old, ended up on the subway tracks after a confrontation. A photographer managed to capture him trying to climb back onto the platform, but only a few seconds later, the arriving train struck him. Publication of the shot sparked intense debate. People argued over whether such an image should have been published and why nobody managed to help in time. Filipino politician Ronaldo Doa was taking a celebratory photo with his family on New Year's. However, in the background stood an armed man who, in the next moment, fired shots that took the politician's life. This incident shocked the country, for the killer was captured right in the frame, becoming a key piece of evidence. In one picture, two armed men pose in the jungle, not noticing a jaguar creeping up behind them. The predator moved so fast that one of the hunters did not have time to react. The other also failed to help. The encounter ended in tragedy. Regina K. Walters became the victim of the infamous trucker serial killer Robert Rhodes. In a horrifying photo, Regina is pictured moments before her death, terrified in the serial killer's grasp. She and her friend Ricky Lee Jones were trying to hitchhike to Mexico, but ended up in his makeshift torture chamber in his truck. This photograph stands as a dreadful record of a tragedy on American roads. In April of the year 1999 in the United States, a class photo was taken at a school showing two teenagers, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, in the back row, pretending to point guns at their classmates. Only a few days later, they carried out one of the most horrifying school shootings in American history, taking the lives of many students and one teacher. A Lebanese teenager named Mohammed Shar and his friends took a routine group photo in Beirut, unaware that a bomb would explode nearby just moments later. Mohammed and many of his friends lost their lives. The photo survived, a grim testament to how fragile our world can be. Passengers on an Air Florida flight took their final photo inside the aircraft before taking off from Washington. After takeoff, the plane lost control and fell into a frozen river, also colliding with several cars on a bridge. Dozens of people died, and the event became one of the most infamous tragedies in the history of the capital's airport. A stunning image shows a bride in a white dress on the streets of Beirut. Yet, on the same day, a colossal explosion shook the port, destroying part of the city and seriously injuring thousands of people. That photo became a symbol of how a celebration can instantly turn into a catastrophe. At the Anchorage Zoo, an Australian tourist named Catherine Varber Burton wanted to photograph a polar bear named Binky through the fence. She climbed over the barrier and the bear suddenly attacked, clamping onto her leg. The next day, newspapers published an image of Binky with the bright red sneaker of the tourist between his teeth. The young woman survived but suffered severe injuries. In the picture, a soldier with the battle nickname Prygun makes a sudden leap, unaware of a hidden mine ahead. The explosion cost him his leg, and although he received immediate medical help, he was left with serious injuries that changed his life forever. Lieutenant Leonard Cleed, a Special Forces soldier, was captured during a mission in New Guinea in the Second World War. In the photo, he still stands with his hands tied behind his back, but in a matter of moments, he was executed by beheading. This shot reminds us of the brutality of military conflict, where soldiers' lives can be cut short with neither trial nor investigation. Legendary tightrope walker Carl Wallenda, who was well over 70, attempted another high-wire act at more than 100 feet in Puerto Rico. A photographer captured his confident smile just before he fell. That fall was fatal, closing the curtain on an era of old-school circus performances. In the state of Utah, 3 teenage friends decided to take a humorous photo with an oncoming train in the background. Only minutes later, the train reached them, and all 3 were killed. A monument was placed at the site of the tragedy by loved ones to remind everyone of the underestimated dangers of railroad tracks. 17-year-old Andrei Rovsky posed on the rooftop of a high-rise building for a dramatic photo, not knowing that in just 10 seconds, he would fall. The boy died instantly. In Las Vegas, during the world-famous Siegfried and Roy show, one of the white tigers suddenly attacked Roy Horn in front of a stunned audience. Roy suffered severe wounds and survived, but he lost part of his motor abilities and could no longer perform. The city lost a legendary show that had symbolized magic and luxury in the entertainment world. Alian Samsudin, a Malaysian cobra charmer, was famous for his astonishing bravery and skill. But during one performance in his home country, the snakes behaved unpredictably, and one gave him a fatal bite. Thus ended the life of the man once referred to as the Wizard of Venom. Jolie Collin went on vacation to a scenic spot with her ex-boyfriend Lauren Branner. He persuaded her to climb a high cliff, and just when she was admiring the view, he pushed her off. The photo, captured right before the push, is a terrifying testament to a crime committed against a backdrop of natural beauty. Simon Gunan, a former Thai Navy SEAL, was part of the operation to rescue a group of teenagers trapped in the flooded Tam Luang cave. In his photograph, he is happily waving as he heads out to deliver oxygen tanks to the kids. The mission ended successfully, but Gunan lost consciousness from lack of air on the return journey and could not be saved. During a demonstration flight, a Hawker Hunter fighter failed to complete a loop and slammed into a highway. Dozens of people were killed, while the pilot survived. The shocking event led to permanent changes in safety requirements at air shows, making them stricter. An old military photo shows Soviet partisans preparing to execute a man accused of treason. In the foreground, the condemned man stands, doomed, while the grim faces of the soldiers speak for themselves. Taken during the Second World War, the image embodies the grim side of resistance. In an archival image, 2-year-old James Bulger can be seen holding the hand of a 10-year-old boy near the entrance of a shopping center. Passers-by paid little attention, but a few hours later, those older boys abducted and brutally killed the toddler. This horrific case shocked both the United Kingdom and the world. A black and white photo from the Second World War shows a Japanese kamikaze pilot directing his plane straight toward the deck of an American warship. Sailors on the vessel attempt to shoot down this gift from the Emperor, but they fail. The resulting explosion wiped out both the plane and many lives on board. Another wartime image features an American bomber critically damaged by anti-aircraft fire. The plane is aflame, beginning its descent. Most of its crew did not survive that mission, just one among countless aerial tragedies of the Second World War. Franz Reichelt, inspired by the vision of a working parachute, decided to test his invention by jumping off the Eiffel Tower. A photograph shows him in the moment before he jumped, surrounded by a curious crowd, unaware that his parachute would fail to open. The autopsy suggested his heart had stopped mid-fall. In this historic image, President John F. Kennedy rides through the streets of Dallas, smiling at the onlookers. In mere moments, his car would turn onto another street where a fatal shot would be fired, changing American history forever. The tragedy happened before hundreds of witnesses. A famous photo shows Jack Ruby aiming a gun at Lee Harvey Oswald, the suspect in President Kennedy's assassination. Oswald died within seconds of that shot, and Ruby became a controversial figure in an investigation that spawned countless conspiracy theories. In a lesser-known photograph, Timothy McVeigh is seen in the distance, having parked a truck loaded with deadly explosives near a federal building in Oklahoma City. Shortly afterward, the explosion destroyed the structure and took many lives, including children's. This bombing remains one of the most devastating acts of terrorism in United States history. During a debate in Japan, a young ultra-right radical named Otoya Yamaguchi suddenly pulled out a traditional Japanese sword and attacked the politician Inejiro Asanuma. Cameras captured the strike live on the air, shocking the entire nation. In the photo, a smiling Ashley Guindon begins her very first shift with the Virginia police. On that very first call, she encountered a ruthless criminal who had murdered his own wife and then shot Ashley fatally. Despite the doctor's efforts, the rookie officer could not be saved. Shortly before taking off, pilot Paul Tibbets, seated in the cockpit of the Enola Gay, waved cheerfully. This was the bomber that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, marking the dawn of the nuclear era. That pre-flight photo became a symbol of a fateful decision in the Second World War. A rare image shows the city of Hiroshima moments before the most catastrophic event. Soon, a vast flash and shockwave would level much of the area. Only the Genbaku Dome remained as a tragic emblem of the disaster and a memorial to its victims. The legendary Brazilian racing driver Ayrton Senna is pictured resting calmly in the pits before the Grand Prix. On the track, however, a fatal crash claimed the life of one of the greatest Formula racers of all time. Senna's death shocked the motorsport world and permanently changed the sport's safety rules. This old photo captures a condemned prisoner seated in the electric chair, wires running to him. He knows that in a few minutes, an electrical current will end his life. The pre-execution image underscores the horror of such forms of capital punishment. The young and talented actress Sharon Tate, who was in her final months of pregnancy, is shown in the last evening of her life. That night, followers of Charles Manson came to the house, leaving behind one of Hollywood's most brutal and resonant tragedies. This photo echoes the happy life cut short by murderers. Security camera footage reveals the student Elisa Lam behaving oddly in the elevator of the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. She vanished after that video, and her body was discovered later in a rooftop water tank. It became one of the most mysterious stories. No one could definitively explain how she ended up there. Taken just moments before the second use of atomic weapons in human history, the photograph of Nagasaki's mushroom cloud appears almost surreal. Seconds later, a destructive wave engulfed the surroundings. The city was devastated, claiming thousands of lives and leaving grave consequences for years to come. Brazilian priest Adelir Antonio de Carli attempted to break a record by remaining aloft for many hours on a large cluster of helium balloons. His beaming face before takeoff showed his enthusiasm. Soon afterward, contact with him was lost. Many days later, his body washed ashore, proving how perilous his plan was. Surfer Mick Fanning was preparing for a heat when a massive great white shark appeared behind him, tangled in the board's leash. Fanning struck the predator with his fist and managed to swim away. Everyone on shore froze, while the athlete narrowly escaped with his life. In the early 40s of the last century, an air show aimed to demonstrate the new Waco glider. Suddenly, a faulty bolt caused the wing to detach mid-air. The glider plummeted from a great height, taking the lives of about 10 people on board. Legendary rapper Tupac Shakur was photographed leaving a boxing match after a Mike Tyson fight. Paparazzi caught him with his friend Suge Knight in a car. Only a few hours later, Tupac was fatally shot. That image became the final glimpse of his life, symbolizing the bloody feud within the hip-hop community. Darsh Patel and his friends went hiking in the forest. They spotted a black bear, and someone snapped a photo, assuming the animal was not dangerous. However, the bear charged them, backing the group into a corner. Darsh was killed in the attack, and only the photograph serves as a reminder of that horrifying encounter. Surveillance footage shows a young Hasib Hussein with a backpack purchasing something near King's Cross Station. This became evidence linking him to the terrorist attacks that took numerous lives and sparked panic across London. Soon after, Hussein detonated himself on a bus. Nicholas Molly, a professional freediver, descended into the famous Blue Hole in the Bahamas, reaching over 200 feet in depth. In the photo, he signals that everything is fine, but on the ascent, he lost consciousness due to hypoxia. Attempts to save him were unsuccessful. A seasoned rescuer, Robert Overacker, aimed to highlight homelessness by riding a jet ski to the brink of Niagara Falls and jumping over with a parachute. The chute did not deploy, and the daredevil perished in the turbulent waters. The legendary lead singer of Queen, Freddie Mercury, was photographed in his garden shortly before his death. Only one day earlier, he had officially confirmed he had AIDS, and soon his heart failed. Freddie Mercury left a monumental cultural legacy, and this photo remains forever in rock history. A snapshot shows United States Marines on a landing craft, gearing up to storm the coast of France. Many would never return. The beaches of Normandy were heavily mined and under relentless fire. That moment in history was a turning point in the Second World War. A photograph shows Hank Carr standing next to two police officers in Florida. Barely a minute later, he seized their weapon and fatally shot both officers, leading to a massive police operation. The tragedy stunned locals and led to changes in the rules for detaining suspects. A photograph remains of the legendary liner Titanic as it sets out to sea from its final European port. Nobody suspected that later that same night, the ship would collide with an iceberg and sink, claiming countless lives and leaving a permanent scar in maritime history. Here we see one of the last images of the iconic martial arts master Bruce Lee, taken shortly before his sudden passing. He was in his early 30s. Though he departed unexpectedly, he left an enduring legacy in cinema and inspired millions around the world. In an iconic photo, John Lennon signs an album for Mark David Chapman. No one realized that later, this same individual would fatally shoot the legendary musician as he returned home. Thus ended the artistic legacy of one of the Beatles. Russian roofer Pavel Kashin, famous for extreme acrobatics, was photographed on the edge of a rooftop in St. Petersburg. Seconds later, he performed a flip and failed to regain his balance. The calamity was abrupt and shocking, even to a seasoned thrill seeker. French driver Jules Bianchi prepared for a race in Japan under very poor weather conditions. The race went on despite the rain-soaked track. Bianchi collided at high speed with a recovery vehicle and suffered injuries from which he never recovered. That accident prompted the Federation to introduce tougher safety measures. An Indian actor named Krishna Nair, popularly known as Gian, was renowned for risky stunts with no stand-ins. But on one film set, He attempted a move that was too dangerous, lost his footing, and fell to his death, cutting short his aspiring career. Near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev can be seen. Moments later, explosions from bombs they placed in backpacks tore through the crowd, leaving many with severe injuries. Images of the two were circulated everywhere in the hunt for the perpetrators. In a crude cell phone video, the former president of Iraq is shown being led to the gallows. He was read the verdict for his countless crimes. Moments later, Saddam was executed. The footage spread worldwide in a matter of hours. Passengers on a Japan Airlines flight photographed each other in the cabin. A few minutes after takeoff, the plane experienced decompression, resulting in loss of control. The crash claimed hundreds of lives, sparing only a few by a miracle. The photo became the final memento of those on board. Friends, in this 5-second pause, I ask you to please rate the video and leave absolutely any comment. This greatly helps our channel develop further. Thank you so much. Aviator. Amelia Earhart waved goodbye to her husband in Miami before embarking on her round-the-world trip. She was full of plans, but contact with her disappeared somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, and the legendary pilot was never found. To this day, no one knows what befell her plane and its fearless flyer. Two brothers, Michael and Sean, climbed to a high ledge in a California park, unaware of an approaching storm. Their hair stood on end from static in the air, and someone thought it would be fun to take a photo. Lightning struck in an instant, leaving both siblings badly burned. Fortunately, they survived. In the photograph, Nurse Minga Nzier, fully clad in protective gear, tends to patients during the earliest Ebola outbreak in the 1970s in Yambuku. Only a short time later, she herself contracted the virus and died, becoming a symbol of medicine's vulnerability in the face of a deadly epidemic. A snapshot shows President Franklin Roosevelt warmly greeting his supporters in Miami. Only moments later, shots were fired in the crowd, severely wounding the city's mayor. Roosevelt himself was miraculously unharmed, but the shooting foreshadowed troubled times ahead. In the photo, actor Paul Walker smiles as he gets into a red sports car departing from a charity event. Soon afterward, the car lost control and slammed into a tree, erupting into flames. Fans remember Walker as a star of the Fast and Furious franchise. That final picture stands as a symbol of the fatal moment that claimed his life. A young woman named Oyisa from Kazakhstan was enjoying a scenic rock ledge, taking in the view. She asked a friend to capture an impressive photo, but slipped and fell nearly 100 feet. Rescue efforts failed, and the snapshot remains a bitter reminder of a split-second misstep. Before takeoff from O'Hare Airport in the late 1970s, a photo was taken of passengers and crew as the plane started down the runway. Soon, one of the engines tore off and the aircraft crashed, leveling everything in its path. Hundreds of people died in one of the most catastrophic air disasters in United States history. In the Netherlands, two engineers were repairing a massive wind turbine when a sudden blaze broke out. The flames quickly blocked their escape. A final photo caught them high above the ground, embracing each other in despair with nowhere to go. Dave High took a moving photo of his wife and daughter by the airplane before boarding flight MH17. Their goal was a family trip. The airliner was shot down over a conflict zone and no one survived. The photograph became a symbol of personal heartbreak and a global calamity. In New Zealand, a tourist group and a pilot took off in a hot air balloon to appreciate the views from above. Unexpectedly, the balloon snagged on high-voltage lines, caught fire, and crashed. The photo before the catastrophe shows smiling faces of people unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Surveillance footage captures a woman withdrawing cash at an ATM with a criminal behind her, holding her hostage. Soon, it was revealed that both she and her family, held under threats, were killed. This image became a crucial piece of evidence, and the case shocked the country. Military photojournalist Hilda Clayton recorded a mortar drill in Afghanistan. Her final shot vividly portrays the very moment the mortar exploded due to a malfunction. Hilda and several soldiers were killed instantly, and her photograph stands as a painful proof of duty and sacrifice. 7 astronauts, among them a teacher, prepared for the launch of the Challenger. The first few seconds of flight seemed normal, but shortly thereafter, the space shuttle exploded in midair. No one on board survived. The nation and indeed the world were left in shock. A photo shows a very young man heading off to serve in the military in the early 1940s. He returned home only years later, aged beyond his time. That before and after reveals how war changes people and erases their youthful smiles. In Taipei, a Trans-Asia airplane took off and was recorded by a dashcam. Its wing clipped a bridge before the aircraft crashed into a river. Dozens of people died, and those images from the bridge circulated worldwide, highlighting the horrifying moment of the crash. A picture shows Prince Philip, husband of the British Queen, riding in a car with attendants. This was among his final public appearances. A little more than 3 weeks later, he passed away at a very advanced age. The photograph serves as the final point of a lengthy royal life. Another image tied to Columbine, Rachel Scott is seen smiling just one day before Eric and Dylan went on their shooting rampage. Rachel was their first victim and later became an emblem for school unity, urging kindness and empathy. School gym security cameras captured Kendrick Johnson walking inside. The next day, he was discovered dead, rolled up in a gym mat. The circumstances of his death remain suspicious, sparking numerous theories and unanswered questions. Danish inventor Peter Madsen is photographed with journalist Kim Wall near his private submarine. The two departed together, but Madsen returned alone. Kim Wall's body was later recovered at sea with clear signs of homicide. The case aroused huge public interest and legal proceedings. In the capital of what was once Burma, now Myanmar, a photograph shows an official delegation expecting the arrival of South Korean President Chun Doo-hwan. 3 North Korean agents set off an explosion, intending to kill the president. By chance, he survived, but many in the delegation did not. A young couple, Jason Allen and Lindsay Cutshaw, believed a night under the stars would be romantic. While they slept in the open, an unknown individual attacked them. That person turned out to be a serial killer, later apprehended after several years. The photo still exudes the calm of that final evening. Dr. Deepa Sharma went to the Himalayas, sharing a photo that showed her smiling with a small backpack against a mountainous backdrop. But soon, a sudden landslide buried the bus she was traveling on. It happened so fast that no one could escape. Jeremy Worthy started a Facebook live stream while kayaking near Bateman's Bay. The water was turbulent. The recording captures his desperate cries for help as he was overturned by the current. That was the last broadcast he ever made. American doctor and television journalist Jamie Zimmerman was enjoying the Hawaiian coastline, shooting videos and selfies. A slippery rock proved her downfall. A wave pulled her into the open ocean. All rescue attempts were in vain. Late in the previous century, the steamboat Sultana was carrying thousands of passengers when its boilers exploded under immense pressure. Over half of those aboard perished. A rare image shows the vessel only moments before the tragedy. Mount St. Helens in Washington state looked peaceful in springtime, and tourists took lovely photos there. Suddenly, a colossal eruption occurred with violent avalanches of rock and thick clouds of ash. The photo is historic. Just another minute, and the surrounding area was overwhelmed by nature's fury. In one photo, a family in the Soviet city of Pripyat smiles cheerfully outside their apartment building. None of them suspected that the Chernobyl nuclear power plant would soon have an accident. Their home would be abandoned, and the area would become an exclusion zone. Another snapshot, taken after the reactor explosion in Chernobyl, shows liquidation teams stepping off a helicopter, armed with instruments and ready to combat radiation. Villages and towns were contaminated, and these people sacrificed their own health and lives to avert an even greater catastrophe. A black and white photo shows Gandhi walking through a garden to a prayer meeting. Nathuram Godse approached him there, and fatal shots rang out. India lost its spiritual leader, who had sought independence through nonviolent means. On the Philippines, when Mount Pinatubo woke up, deadly streams of lava and ash poured down its slopes. In one picture, a truck is seen trying to flee from surging clouds of scorching ash, but nature's might was stronger. Only a lucky few got away. In a photograph, a wall of flames nears the outskirts of a city. People are still trying to understand the danger, but the blaze is already unstoppable. It would soon devour large tracts of land, leaving only ashes behind. Soviet wartime footage recorded the moment a young political officer urged his comrades forward against German forces, only to be struck immediately by a sniper's bullet. This frame exemplifies both the bravery and the tragic sacrifice of Soviet troops during the Great Patriotic War. At a Turkish gallery, Ambassador Andrei Karlov was delivering a speech at a photo exhibition. A man in a suit stood behind him, and moments later, the man drew a gun and fired. Images from the scene made global headlines, shocking people with their brutality. President William McKinley of the United States greeted visitors at an exposition in Buffalo when Leon Czolgosz approached and fired twice. Though McKinley did not die instantly, doctors could not save him. That photo taken before the shooting reminds us how suddenly tragedy can strike. A photograph accidentally included police officer Stephen Green standing beside a suspicious man. In a matter of seconds, the man whipped out a gun and opened fire, fatally wounding the officer. His shocked colleagues installed a memorial plaque at the station to honor him. Carl Williams was reading a newspaper at a fitness club, utterly unaware that an enemy was sneaking up behind him with a metal bar from a weight machine. The subsequent blow was fatal. Security cameras captured both that photo and the unfolding crime. Ramon Gonzalez took a selfie on his brand new motorcycle, smiling without suspecting that in just a few minutes, he would have a crash on the highway. That image became the last photo in the young biker's life. The Granite Mountain. Hotshot's crew battled a wildfire at Yarnell Hill. A group photo showed confident firefighters ready to confront the blaze. However, a sudden shift in the wind trapped them, and 19 members of the team died in the flames. William Becker, mayor of St. Louis, along with other officials and military personnel, boarded a military glider. Nobody anticipated that mid-flight, the craft would lose control. The subsequent crash claimed the lives of all on board. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Worley set out on a solitary trek across Antarctica. He was only a few kilometers from his goal when exhaustion overcame him. Searchers found him in a critical state, and he died of hypothermia and organ failure. His last photograph shows him smiling, but visibly weary. A French Concorde ignited on the runway of Charles de Gaulle Airport when debris on the tarmac ruptured a tire, damaging the engine. The aircraft lost lift and crashed soon thereafter, killing many. This disaster effectively ended the era of supersonic passenger flights. Legendary American driver Dale Earnhardt was calm and prepared for his race in his final recorded moments. A terrifying collision then claimed his life on the track. Fans continue to honor him on NASCAR circuits. The Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were photographed riding through the city, greeting crowds. Very soon, they were shot and killed by the assassin Gavrilo Princip. Their deaths ignited the spark that set off the First World War. Cadet Stephen Hilder was all smiles before a parachute jump, flashing a sign for good luck. But in the air, neither of his chutes opened. Investigators discovered that someone had tampered with the lines. A day of skydiving thus turned fatal. George Mallory and Andrew Sandy Irvine smiled at their base camp, preparing to attempt the first ascent of Mount Everest. They vanished during their climb, and Mallory's remains were only found decades later. On the deck of a Japanese aircraft carrier, pilots waved happily before taking off to attack the United States naval base. Pearl Harbor's surprise strike drew America into the Second World War. Photos later revealed the fervor of a nation before that mission. A music group launched its show using pyrotechnics. Suddenly, the sparks ignited nearby soundproofing, and the club was engulfed in flames. Many concert-goers perished, and this became one of the most horrific fires in a performance venue. Young explorer Christopher McCandless chose to live in the wilds of Alaska, far from modern society. In his final photo, he appears thin but still smiling. Sadly, lack of food and harsh conditions took his life. His story inspired a book and a film. One of the last pictures of Diana, Princess of Wales, shows her riding in a car with a companion in a Paris tunnel, fleeing paparazzi. Mere moments later, a fatal collision claimed her life, sending shockwaves worldwide. American actor James Dean dubbed his sports car Little Bastard. At a gas station, he was photographed standing by it before embarking on that ill-fated drive. Soon, a head-on collision cut short the life of this rising star. A shot taken shortly before the assassination of Martin Luther King shows him standing on a motel balcony in Memphis, pointing at something in the distance while discussing a coming protest action. The next day, a sniper's bullet ended his life, altering the course of the civil rights movement. High above San Diego, a commercial airliner collided with a small private Cessna, and both came crashing down onto residential areas. Everyone aboard both planes died, as did some on the ground. Investigation highlighted human error and flaws in air traffic control. In the early 60s, the United States figure skating team posed for a photograph before boarding a flight to Brussels for the World Championships. The plane crashed, and no one survived. The sporting world was devastated by the loss of athletes, coaches, medical staff, and relatives. A Uruguayan airplane carrying players from a local rugby team and their families went down in the Andes. Those who survived faced dire cold and starvation. In the photo, they are still unaware of the terrible ordeal soon to descend upon them. In the Lviv region at an air show, a military plane lost control and plowed into a crowd of onlookers. The final moments before disaster were captured in a photo in which the pilot seemed to lose control. Dozens, including children, died. In the photo, a man named Duncan stands in the water, holding his small son near a picturesque shore. No one witnessed the moment when a powerful undertow suddenly pulled him under. His body was discovered much later, and the child was left with enduring trauma. The Hindenburg dirigible attempted to dock over an airfield in New Jersey, but a spark ignited its hydrogen. A massive fire erupted, killing part of the crew and passengers. Images of the accident stand as pivotal lessons in safety. An officer named Arthur Bud Holland performed risky maneuvers in a strategic bomber but lost control mid-turn. 4 service members perished. This tragedy prompted stricter oversight and raised questions about pilot training standards. On a Thai beach, sunbathers snapped photos, unaware the sea would soon unleash a colossal wave. Triggered by an underwater earthquake, the disaster took a staggering number of lives. This image of nearly carefree people is hauntingly close to the catastrophe. Robert Landsberg, a photographer, was at Mount St. Helens during its eruption. Realizing he could not escape, he kept photographing until the end. Right before his death, he shielded his camera with his body so the film would survive. He paid with his life to document history. 2 teenagers, Austin Stefanos and Perry Cohen, decided to head out on a small boat in spite of storm warnings. Their last photo shows them at the dock. Later, the boat was found adrift, empty. The boys never reappeared, and their fate remains unknown. A young woman, Diana Wilde, stood smiling on a cliff as her friends took a picture. Nobody knew she would be shoved off by individuals who had taken out a large life insurance policy on her. They were eventually caught and convicted, but the photo still horrifies viewers. Molly LaRue and Jeff Hood were happily documenting their hiking adventure. All seemed well until a fugitive discovered them and fatally shot both. The hiking community in the United States was appalled, learning that danger can lurk in the most scenic of places. Joseph, the older brother of John F. Kennedy, was photographed before a secret flight mission. His plane, laden with explosives, detonated mid-air due to a technical fault. Thus, another life of the Kennedy family came to a tragic end. Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon smile in a selfie prior to hiking in Panama's mountains. They disappeared without a trace. Later, only a backpack and a camera containing disturbing nighttime images were found. To this day, no one knows what happened in those jungles. A group of students was traveling to a field trip and stopped by a river to take pictures. Suddenly, the gates of a hydroelectric station opened, and the overwhelming torrent swept the young people away. Italian mountaineer Filippo Uari sent a final photo from the snowy peaks, writing, "Look where I am now." Moments later, an avalanche overwhelmed him. Initially, only his equipment was recovered, and his body was found much later. Volcanologist David Alexander Johnston took what he considered a safe vantage point at Mount St. Helens. The eruption proved more powerful than predicted. He only managed to radio, "Vancouver, this is it," before his transmission fell silent. Tourists lined up for a group photo on a beach as the sea abruptly receded. In mere minutes, a tsunami surge struck the shore, destroying everything in its path. By a near miracle, the camera survived, and so did the image. An anonymous passenger snapped a photo out the window of an aircraft, capturing flames and the fuselage shaking. Seconds later, the plane banked, became uncontrollable, and crashed. No one on board survived. In the picture, a massive cargo vessel laden with thousands of containers is beginning to list under enormous waves. The crew tried to correct course, but the ship sank. Underwater vehicles later located only part of its freight. Both financial and ecological damage were immense. Alexei Nikolaevich and his sister Olga from the House of Romanov pose aboard a steamer transporting them to Yekaterinburg. Before long, the entire royal family would be executed in a basement. This photo on the steamer became one of their final glimpses of former grandeur. A group of Ural hikers stand amid snowy mountains, seemingly brimming with optimism and confidence. A few days later, they were found dead in baffling circumstances. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains unsolved to this day. Firefighters were battling flames aboard a cargo ship moored at the dock. No one anticipated the cataclysmic explosion that tore apart a section of the port and claimed numerous lives, going down as one of the most destructive non-nuclear blasts ever recorded. In this photo taken inside the Titanic's luxurious gym, two crew members smile at a reporter shortly before departure. Within a few days, they and countless others would meet their fate at the bottom of the Atlantic. Tourists took a guided trip to an active volcanic island that appeared benign, but trouble was literally brewing. The volcano erupted violently, spewing ash. Several people perished. Many suffered severe burns. Andrea Mazzetto from Italy was enjoying time with his girlfriend, admiring the cliffs of Rocca al Tare. He asked for a photo, accidentally dropped his phone, and in reaching for it, lost his balance. The fall proved fatal, leaving the last photo as a painful keepsake. A contented hunter poses with a downed deer, unaware that just behind him, in the shadows, is a lion intrigued by the scent of fresh prey. The situation is tense. The predator is clearly ready to pounce without warning. French friends Gilles and Maran took a selfie before stepping into a concert at the Bataclan in Paris. Nobody suspected that armed terrorists would soon storm the venue. Many people died, and all of France was plunged into mourning. Sometimes a single photograph can not only preserve the memory of an event, but also become a fatal turning point in human history. Thank you so much for watching this long episode to the very end. Take care of yourself and those around you. Life can sometimes change in an instant. Leave comments, like this video, and subscribe to TopFacts for the most incredible compilations of facts and videos from across the internet. And right now, check out our previous episodes featuring photographs that nobody can explain.